Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to another episode of the Element Podcast. What's happening on my woods, people? Currently, I'm sitting in the woods, but I'm not hunting or fishing. I'm sitting in a truck, and my co-pilot, who's currently on his lunch break, an extended lunch break, Mr. K.C. Smith, is flying a plane over here, and that's no joke. What's happening, dude?
I'm glad Jet leaves me little toys to play with in your vehicle.
Yep.
Whenever we're in here, keeps me busy on these long road trips that we take. So it's nice. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But besides that, just I'm pretty hungry right
dude,
now.
Me
to
too.
The truth.
And the reason why that we're extra hungry is A, it's past my lunchtime.
Yeah.
But B, we just did an incredible interview with Mr. Jesse Griffiths from a restaurant down in Austin, Texas. I don't know if he was at his first or second restaurant, but he said he was at a restaurant.
He's at the second one. He went to the second one.
The Taquiera.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jesse is an author, a chef, an outdoorsman. So as an author, he has a book called A Field, and that's one word, A Chef's Guide to Preparing and Cooking Wild Fish and Game. He was a finalist for the James Beard Award, which is pretty awesome. He founded a restaurant down there in Austin that's based off of the Locavore movement, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited about this. He's also been on Bizarre Foods, I believe.
With your hero.
I think that's where I originally saw him.
Yeah.
With my hero. And so anyway, this guy is he's done it, man. And we did an interview with him, and there was some kind of weird monster effect in there or something during one part. But there was I don't know, you might have to excuse the audio a little bit for a section there if you notice it. If not, don't even think about it. Recently, we went on a squirrel hunt.
We did.
What was that all?
Which turned into a rabbit hunt.
And then a shed hunt.
And then a shed hunt.
And then a buck bed hunt.
Yeah. So as most of our postseason outdoor adventures go, we start to key in on one thing and then gradually drift towards the whitetails. It's just who we are. But we got a lot of the other stuff done too.
Yeah, we pretty much did it all.
You're the squirrel spotting master,
dude. I feel good,
dude. I was impressed.
It was like that one time this summer when I was like, dude, hey, how about this spot? I'm looking at it on a map, and there should be bucks bedding in here, and using, going up to the doe bedding, and then we saw bucks from the road. It was kind of the same thing because, when I spot things and you haven't spotted them yet, it's amazing. It never happens hardly.
I think part of it was I already mentally switched over to looking down low.
Well, I know the second one, you were kind of that way already for sure.
But you did do a good job on spotting some squirrels. And maybe, too, I was thinking rabbits. So,
dude, you got into rabbit mode, rabbit raging mode.
Yeah, I got the rabbit. So
you weren't about it at first.
No, I like squirrel better than I do rabbit. But rabbits are kind of more fun to shoot because they're fast.
Dude, we had some fun doing that.
Yeah, it was cool.
I did get a enema from a cedar tree. I don't even know what that is really.
So get out, find your local public brush pile and jump on it, and you'll kill two birds with one stone, or two rabbits with one jump. But
don't do it during snake season.
Yeah, don't do it during snake season. You can get a friendly clean out from a cedar bush like Tyler, or you can also run a rabbit out and smoke him.
Or you can shoot a tree like I did when the rabbit ran out. This sucker came running out so fast, like the rabbits do.
They came out fast, man.
And it was not like I'm going to go and then stop and look back and then go. It was I'm gone. And so he takes off through these cedar elms and cedar trees, and he was going straight away. He was only 15 yards when I finally got up on him. Mm-hmm. But it was way too thick in there, and I just blasted the cedar elm tree.
Yeah, we could see the hole through where you shot through the trees. Yeah.
So that was fun though. We killed a rabbit, a fox squirrel, a cat squirrel, and you found a shed.
Found a shed, man.
Teenager shed.
I don't know. The first.
I'm telling you, I'm convinced.
The first shed of 2018. I've never done well with sheds in anywhere around that I go, except for South Texas. But last year I had a great shed season, and this year looking pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be out as much as I was last year to find as many, but I was pretty cool. I was pretty pumped to find that one. I mean, it literally had like 1 inch of tine sticking up out of the leaves.
Dude,
it was just a happen chance, though. Like, I just, there's no way I should have found the thing, except I was like looking at the ground right there, and I was like, huh?
Yeah. We had got into whitetail scouting mode at this point. Not shed hunting. We were scouting for deer sign, and we get into this area where there is 2 rubs, I think, and one of them was good.
2 good rubs, yeah.
And so we're like, man, there's a lot of edge habitat here. This is definitely a transition area, even though, as usual in Texas, at least in the parts that we hunt, you couldn't see a trail, really. It's just like, oh, well, there's a lane there
they might move
through. Yeah, and so anyway, we're sitting there. We were talking about, we're like, well, maybe we should hang a camera here. What do you think? And we had picked one up, a camera that we had in the area, and we were going to put it out. And so this is why me finding these squirrels is such a big deal. Because we're like, okay, let's put a camera out right on that tree over there. And we start to step. And Casey's like, oh, there's a shed. And it looks like, literally like an inch of baby tine sticking out of the leaves. It's like one of those things that just, I would have just walked right over it, but it was a good find.
It's cool. I was pumped.
A little 8-point shed from probably like a 1-year-old buck.
Yeah, it's real old too. So, it's chewed up a lot, which a lot of times I'd either rather find them, and it would be sad, I guess, if it was a big one, but like a brand new brown that's big, I like that. But I also like the really old ones for some reason. It's kind of been chewed on and stuff. They're just kind of like neat, Every shed kind of tells a story. Yeah,
for sure. I guess last thing I'd mention before we go to the interview is that the Pint Night that we have coming up, Texas BHA Pine Night, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, where we're doing a live podcast. And we're going to be doing that with our buddies from Stormwater Creek. And we're going to get to see all our buddies from Texas BHA that we haven't seen in a while since basically One-Eyed Jack. So released, and or not released, but the tour came through. And so that's exciting for us. But don't forget that it starts at 2 p.m. on a Saturday, February 17th. And it is at the Legal Draft Beer Company there in Arlington. I haven't ever been there, but I hear that it's a pretty cool setup in there.
Sweet.
And they've got, I guess, like some of those big copper machines and stuff working in there, I guess. That's what I hear. Yeah. I may be spreading false statements here.
Yeah, so come on Saturday and figure it out for yourself.
You have to fact check. Yeah,
fact
you have
check
to
that.
Personally fact check. So anyway, I guess that's about all we have to plug here, and we will get to the interview with Jesse Griffiths. So did you grow up in Austin?
No, I didn't. I grew up in North Texas, in Denton.
Oh, okay.
But I've lived in Austin for pushing 20 years now, though.
Yeah.
But I just spent most of my time growing up in Denton, a little bit in Fort Worth, and then down here in Central Texas.
Mm-hmm. Have you pretty much hunted all over the state? You spent some time hunting up in the Denton area and such?
Not really.
Yeah.
I started hunting a lot later in life than most. I've fished since I can remember, but I just started hunting probably about 11 years ago after I'd moved down to Austin. So the majority of my hunting has been done in Central Texas, South Texas. No, I haven't really been back up to Denton that much. I know it's really good up there as far as ducks go. And I saw a picture of some buck that a guy poached.
Yeah.
The other day.
Yep, we saw it too. It's a giant.
Yeah. I missed Denton. Growing up around Denton was amazing. They were just filling Lake Ray Roberts when I was basically, first able to drive. And so as they filled that lake up, we'd go out there and we caught so many fish in the first few years that lake was filling, white bass, crappie, catfish, largemouth, everything. It was a good time.
Oh, I can imagine. We grew up out here on Lake Fork. I don't know if you know where that is.
Definitely.
Yeah. So big largemouth country, and you're not supposed to eat them according to culture, but.
Ooh, I'm going to make some people real mad today.
Hey, not me at all. We have eaten them, and I don't know if that makes people mad or not, but I'll admit to it. It's pretty good fish.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
The little ones, of course.
yeah, I'm not trying to eat, the 10-pounders that are apparently everywhere that I can't catch. Yeah, well, that's cool, man. It's good that we share some similar roots there, I guess. So you were saying that you didn't really grow up hunting. What has that done for your appreciation for the outdoors, and also just your stance on being able to harvest your own food, essentially?
Well, I loved fishing. And every excuse to be outside when I was growing up. And then working in restaurants really put me in front of food a lot, and then learning to butcher, things like that. And it kind of eventually just evolved into really wanting to hunt. Went on for the first time and absolutely took to it. And I don't think I've bought meat in over 6 years now.
Wow.
That's cool.
I will say it helps when you own a butcher shop, but
Yeah.
But just having that connection to it has been really nice, and then it kind of fills out the year. I mean, between fishing and hunting, and so I think it also has given me a really good perspective as far as people that are new to hunting, and we do a lot of besides the restaurants, we take a lot of people on hunting trips. We call them hunting schools, where we take people out and show them start to finish how to shoot, clean, butcher, cook, store, package, everything, animals and fish. And I think having a perspective of coming to it as an adult has been very helpful in me being able to educate people who are coming to it as adults as well, because there's a lot of new hunters out there. I mean, it's hunting has kind of lost its redneck sheen that it had for so long, appropriately being viewed as a way of getting food, and coming to it later on, especially in the Austin market. I've been able to kind of convey that, like, oh, it's just it's like having a garden. It's part of it. You can have chickens for eggs. You have a garden, grow some vegetables, go shoot a deer. It's all kind of, it's not the same. Shooting a deer is probably the most fun, but they're all connected, and I think people are starting to see it that way.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm glad that you're trying to perpetuate that too. I see that trend a little bit too. We're not near as urban, so we're just not around as many people, and not around as many urbanites so people who kind of, I guess, grasp that and would be going for that different direction. We kind of live in that redneckville you're talking about, to where like hunting has just been culture and always has been. So it's cool to see it coming from the other direction. You talked about, I guess you fished for forever, but you came to hunting later in life as a pursuit, I guess, for better, more quality ingredients. How did you get your start like in the culinary world?
Well, I started working in general when I was I got my first job when I was 14, and then when I was 16, I just signed on to a restaurant. I just started working there as a busser, and then I think the best way to put it is I never got out.
Yeah.
I didn't go to college. I didn't go to culinary school. I just stayed working in restaurants. As a waiter, as a bartender. I managed, and then eventually, I didn't feel like the front of the house was, it's long hours and lots of cash, and it's not the most stable environment. So I really wanted to get into the cooking aspect of it. So I just started working in kitchens, and I also did a lot of traveling, which I think is a great way to learn about food, is go somewhere else and eat their food. Whether it's, the high deserts of Mexico or Spain, or, even, Kentucky, just go somewhere else and eat the food and see what they're doing. And did that a lot. And eventually, we built up this business, and were able to open our first restaurant, and then just opened our second. And so I've been in it for a long time. I absolutely love it. I love food in all its forms. And, whether it's, a really beautiful vegetable from a farm down the road, or going out and shooting a really fat hog.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. So The name of your restaurant strikes me as unique. So can you tell us what your restaurant is called and how it got that name?
I can. I definitely have had this conversation before.
Yeah, I figured.
It's called Dai Due, and Dai Due is an Italian, part of an Italian phrase that means "from the two kingdoms of nature, choose food with care." It's the first two words of that, and it means "from the two." It's kind of hard to pronounce. It gets we get a lot of different pronunciations of it. I think that's enjoyable. It is a conversation starter.
Oh, sure.
But basically, I saw that proverb in a really old Italian cookbook years before I opened the business, and I was like, "That's it right there." I want to call it that, and I stuck with that.
Yeah, that's cool, man, and effective marketing as well. If you can get people to talk about your name, then you're doing good with that.
Right.
Yeah. So, you talk about going out and shooting wild hogs, and I've looked at your menu and been following you on social media for quite a while. And it seems like you serve quite a bit of wild pork. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And at the new restaurant, the Taqueria, we don't serve any domestic pork at all.
Cool.
We are only serving feral hog.
Yeah.
And a lot of that came, there was kind of a resurgence on our end. We've always served a lot of feral hog at the restaurant, and they're trapped. They're trapped live and brought into a processor. They're inspected ante-mortem before they're killed and a post-mortem, and then they get that blue Texas stamp on them. So they're all inspected. But I love the idea of being able to alleviate this hog problem through eating them. Parks and Wildlife, they've famously said we're not going to barbecue our way out of this situation, but I think that this is a great use of a resource like that. I mean, what situation would we be in if they were inedible? It would be a far worse place. So we made a commitment at the new restaurant to only serve feral hog, and by my estimation, we're probably going to serve about 300 of them a year, and that doesn't count the other restaurants. So I think between the two, we're probably sitting at about 500 a year.
Yeah,
which is a drop in the bucket, of course, but it is doing something.
Yeah.
And we did, in all transparency, campaign pretty heavily against the poisoning of them when the warfarin poison was offered up. I think this is probably about 10 months ago, where that became a thing, and it was defeated, and we were part of that. I was really resistant to the poisoning of them for a lot of reasons, not just selfishly because it might affect our ability to serve them as food, but after doing that, I felt it was pretty incumbent on us to double down on our efforts to just basically kill more of them.
Right.
Like if we're going to say, no, you can't pursue this means to kill these hogs, then we need to up the ante a little bit and step up and see to it that more of them are taken out. So that's one way to do it in my mind.
Yeah. So then how do you, like you said, it's a drop in the bucket, but it is 500 wild pigs a year or so. How do you get other restaurants to get on board, and then further individuals to take that initiative and maybe that responsibility that, hey, if we're going to campaign against this poison, then we still have to do something about it,
Right. I mean, that is a great question, in that how do you get people that are already hunting to consume the hogs, which I think is the responsible outcome of killing a hog, but I mean, you definitely don't have to. And then how do you get other restaurants to do it? And I think that, those are two different issues, and they're both very complex. The first, how do you educate hunters to be able to more easily use feral hogs as a food source, is through education. You have to be able to teach them simple and effective methods that are going to work and that they're going to actually use. When you go to somebody and be like, oh yeah, well, you need to do this intricate cut and French the rack and then wrap it around and then tie it with twine, brine it in this, and then serve it with a lingonberry glaze and smoke it. They're going to look at you and they don't want to do that. It's like, but instead, if you say, I have a really good way to turn a big stinky boar into hamburgers. Like, I mean, then you've got their attention. And if you can make that work for them through a couple, simple tricks or just like preparations, then you are really going to get through to people a lot better. And through our classes, over the years, I hear a lot of questions from people. I mean, to the extent where we used to do venison classes, but all through that class, people would be raising their hand and asking me questions about feral hog. And after that, I was like, well, maybe we really don't even need to do venison classes anymore. And we only do feral hog classes pretty much.
Cool.
Like our day classes, our day butchery classes at the restaurant are pretty much 90% feral hog. And then a lot of our 3-day hunting schools are set. We're going after hogs primarily. And so I think education for existing hunters, teach them how, show them really simple, effective, quick methods. I've always been a fan of just trying to put things in a familiar context for people as far as food. Like, don't try to show them complicated things, but instead, let's look at making chili and meatloaf and meatballs and sausages and hamburgers and pasta sauces and things like that people are going to eat on a Tuesday, instead of these complicated things that they may not even attempt or they could get frustrated with. So I think if you really want them to eat it, then just make it an everyday food. Now, on the other side, when you're dealing with restaurants and kind of the public consumption of feral hogs is where it gets incredibly tricky, because you have state agencies like Parks and Wildlife that want them all dead. And not just bottom line, they just want them dead. They don't want to monetize them so that people have a reason to keep them around, which is part of the reason that we have the problem now, is because people were transporting hogs from one part of the state to the other so they'd have something to hunt. And now that's backfired pretty blatantly. And so Parks and Wildlife wants them dead. And so they creating an industry around making, delicious little gourmet wild feral hog available isn't high on their list. And understandably, I mean, I get that perspective. And then you have the bottleneck where they can only be trapped and brought into a licensed facility and processed to therefore be put into the food supply. And when we get them, they are no cheaper than like a really nice heritage breed domestic pig would be. I mean, they come in costing just as much, maybe even a little more, which a lot of people don't understand. Like, well, how is it that there's this pest, this agricultural nuisance that is expensive to actually get to you? And it's the supply chain is long. The trapper, he puts a lot of miles on his truck. He uses a lot of corn. He builds a lot of traps, and it goes to the processor, who then buys it from him and has to have that inspector there, and then he kills them, and there's the skinning and gutting, and then they have to be transported to us. And so it's just like anything else. There's some costs involved, and so it's not the cheapest meat out there. And for restaurants to get to use it, another issue is that they're very inconsistent. As you all, I'm sure, know, each pig, you can shoot a sow in January that's been eating acorns and has a beautiful 2-inch layer of fat on it, or you could be in South Texas and shoot a boar in August, and those are going to be completely different animals.
Yeah.
Both edible by definition, but definitely not the same as far as quality goes. And so restaurants thrive on consistency. That's why you have restaurant chains, because everything's the same all the time. So how do you get these hogs into the food supply where they're available consistently and at a price that's manageable for a restaurant? And I think, I'm it sounds like I'm leading up to the answer, but I'm just going to stop because I don't have the answer. So, things that we do is, the pigs, I have a very good relationship with the processor that is bringing our pigs in. These pigs are trapped on LCRA land, which is Lower Colorado River Authority land. And for some reason, they're just fat and beautiful, and they taste amazing. And so we get a really consistent product at the restaurant as far as those go, or at both restaurants. But that couldn't be said for everyone everywhere. So it makes it a little easier on us. Very rarely do we get a big boar that's got, kind of that stink to it. He selects mostly mid-sized hogs for us that visually look like they have a good amount of fat. And then the larger boars and the smaller pigs kind of go into a grind or a trim product, which we also purchase. But we're flexible enough to be able to deal with both of those, the whole carcasses and the trim for making sausage and so forth. So that's how we deal with it.
Cool. So we never really covered this, but explain the concept behind Dai Due.
Well, it's really simple. Sometimes, I'll be talking to somebody and they're like, well, that's just such a great idea. And I'm like, that is possibly the oldest idea ever. If not, maybe the second oldest idea ever. And we only source food that's available to us from around here. I don't have like a strict radius that I go with. Sometimes, for Valentine's Day, I might buy some bowfin caviar from southwestern Louisiana. But for the most part, all of our produce, and I mean every bit of our produce, is going to come from Central Texas. Maybe we'll go to South Texas to get some citrus. We'll go to North Texas and get some really nice cow milk cheeses. The hill country is where we get our game. We'll source fish out of the Gulf or freshwater fish. We serve things like catfish and gaspergoo, gar, things like that, which you can't really get at most restaurants. But what I really think is the most exciting part about the concept of the restaurant is it's like local food, but it's also cultural. I mean, we serve a lot of Mexican food. We serve a lot of German food. We will serve Vietnamese food and Creole food. And I think that all these things culturally tie into where we are as Texas. I mean, all of those cultures have come here and settled in and brought with them some really beautiful food traditions. And we just try to take the ingredients that are available to us and apply those traditions to them. And I think also from a monetary standpoint, I really think that in this day and age where things are just so big and spread out, it's nice to literally support your neighbors. And, I'm on a first name basis with almost every vendor. David brings me avocados and limes, and Katie brings me bok choy and lettuce. And, it's really nice to give those people your money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. So you're telling me that I can take a bowfin or a grinnell, like what we call it, with some refinement and actually eat the eggs out of the thing?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a company in Louisiana that takes that grinnell, and they make a pretty good caviar out of that. And we'll serve it on special occasions.
That is awesome.
It's really awesome. There's so many little things like that out there that make the food exciting. Like I just mentioned gar. I mean, people are just like, it's trash fish. And I'll be like, why? Why is it trash fish?
Yeah.
Who decided that? Oh, what do they eat that's so bad? I mean, they eat fish.
Mm-hmm.
We eat fish. Like they're actually, what they are is they're hard to clean.
Yes.
And so they've developed a reputation. Well, and things like that. Or, wild boar, is that edible? Yes, it's edible. It's very edible. In fact, it's some of the best meat I've ever had has come off of feral pigs.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of little things just floating around out there. I mean, we live in a very amazing part of the world in that there's, a semi-arid desert to the west. There is ocean to the east. To the north is these rolling blackland prairies, and there's this to the south. It's just this kind of red dirt and giant deer and olives growing down there, and lemons and papayas and avocados. And so, if you go 3 hours in any direction, you're in a different part of the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's pretty magic here. Actually, it's rough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool, and that's kind of like an interesting concept because people like to talk so, I guess, state-based when they talk about many different things. And we live in the hunting world a lot. So people talk about, oh, down in Texas it's easy, or oh, down in Texas the deer are big. But, it's not that. It's sub-regional. Like every little part of our state does something really good, and it has some things it lacks. But that's kind of the cool part about, I guess, being located, especially where you are in Central Texas, where you can kind of, like you said, go all directions and get all kinds of things. Another thing that we have that's kind of neat is the fact that, like, we're kind of this buffer state of, like, urban but also very wild. So there's a lot of, I guess you could say, like, native things to eat, like deer, turkey, quail, things like that. And then you also have, like, the wild boar or the axis or, largemouth bass that,
right.
Besides like a Guadalupe, there's not largemouths are technically an invasive, so you have all these different things that kind of come together to kind of culminate as like a really great place to be a chef,
Right.
So,
are you suggesting we should eat all the largemouth bass?
Not all. I would like to have a sustainable breeding population, but let me tell you something, man. We hit the creeks, in the spring for crappie. And I'm just as happy when I bring in a 14-inch bass as I am a 14-inch crappie, because they're both delicious. There's nothing wrong with a largemouth at all. And I'm not going to eat a 6-pound rusty old male that's seen 10 spawns. Like, it's not really going to be my number one fish. But fish are fish for the most part. If you do them right, they're all tasty. So there's something I feel like you probably encounter quite often. I guess in your personal life and in the restaurants too, and that's like the mental block against certain species or a certain cut or something like that. Let me give you a for instance. For instance, about, I don't know, it's 2 or 3 days ago, we made a dinner strictly of the hearts of cervids. So we had some Midwest whitetail buck, some hill country does, and an elk heart that we put out on the grill. And my wife, who is lovely, I love her very much, she'll eat, ground meat from pretty much anything, but she just would not touch those hearts. And I know that, especially since you deal in such, I guess, interesting different varieties of foods at your restaurants, that you have to have people come through the door who are really apprehensive to eat some things. So what has been your best approach that you found to kind of overcome those mental blocks and show people that, hey, all of this is food if done right, and it's just like it's all in your head that you won't eat it.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely, and I think that you're touching on a very good subject there, and that when you're using a resource, you should use all the resource, and that includes the heart.
Mm-hmm.
I will make a quick point. Heart is a muscle, just like the tenderloin is.
Yes.
And flavor-wise, it's just, a little more iron flavor, but I love heart.
Me too. Yes.
I think it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And this answer will loop back to what I was saying earlier with putting things in context. And for a long time, we would maybe take a fresh venison liver and saute it up and serve it to people, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's okay. I can do a couple bites of that." But then we found other ways to present all those things, and there's one word that will really encompass all of that, and that word is boudin. So if you take I think the last boudin we made, we used a coot.
Oh, cool! Like the gizzards.
The coot gizzards, and venison liver, and feral hog liver, and some feral hog trim, and made it. It was boudin. It was great. Mm-hmm. So something like that. Just for starters, where you can be like, okay, here we're going to take the heart, the liver, and the kidneys out of this deer, and we're going to cook it with a bunch of peppers and some onion and some really nice fatty feral hog shoulder. And then we're going to grind it all. It's going to look terrible. And then we're going to mix it with rice. And then, and then I think the best way to do that is to fry it, boudin balls. Mm-hmm. And we fry it up, and everybody says, "This is amazing. This is great." And I'm like, well, this is the only thing you really ever need to do with those. If that's all I'm going to get you to do, then that's great. Just this, and one animal's worth of heart, liver, kidney will make an 8-pound batch of boudin. It'll they're a huge party or several dinners or whatever. So I think that, again, put it in context and don't challenge people too much. Just show them that it can be done and try to get them outside of their food prejudices. Like I said, at the restaurant, we'll serve some freshwater fish, and that's hardly ever done. People don't. First off, they don't know what a gaspergoo is.
Yeah.
And then we get to have that conversation with them. And then a lot of times the people that do know what a gaspergoo is tell you it's inedible. Mm-hmm. And that's invariably followed up with me saying, well, have you ever tried it? And then they say, well, no. So how do you know if it's inedible? And you can loop that back to feral hogs as well.
Yeah.
Someone once told me you can't eat a feral hog if it weighs over 120 pounds. So 119, fine. 121, no way.
Yeah.
It's just like, where did that come from? And so much of that, or an aoudad. Aoudad's inedible. Mm-hmm. Not true. Very edible. In fact, good. In fact, great if prepared correctly. If you do the right things. Oh, it's tough. Well, you didn't cook it long enough. Things like that. Yeah. So I think education, more having conversations and getting people out of there. The only thing that's good is backstrap, and that wild ducks don't taste good or whatever. I mean, there's just misconceptions, and the way that people handle game meats or prepare them might not always be in their best interest.
Yeah, sure. And I'd like to touch on that, but I'm going to back you up just a bit because I went to school in College Station, and that's where I learned the term gaspergoo. Before that, we always called them freshwater drum. That's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny to me because I heard that too, like, oh, don't eat that, or like, if you can find somebody to give it to, do it, or what have you. But then you head 3 hours south and you catch a small black drum at the coast, and it's delicious. You'll find it on plates, on menus at restaurants, and they're like literally so basically the same that it's crazy, the fact that they're separate species, like they're just almost the same exact fish. And it's funny how people kind of get that species block in there too. And I've seen that more often. Like, for instance, there are members of my family that will eat deer meat, but if you grind up a hog and try to present it as a hog burger, oh no, I can't do it because it's hog. And it's like, how is it different? I don't understand. Maybe people like that have had like a one bad experience with something, and then it kind of ruins them forever. But I think that's what's cool about how you're doing like the total outdoorsman classes. What do you call those classes where you teach them how to hunt and cook?
We call them hunting schools. Hunting
schools, okay. And when when you do the hunting school, and like you really can facilitate where people don't have that bad experience. Like, hey, yes, you did shoot a 220-pound boar, but if you treat it right, then it can still taste good. And I think that oftentimes people, and I kind of fall into this just a touch, I'll just be honest, like there's a gradient scale of, something that's worth harvesting because it tastes good enough to prepare, but I don't want to deal with an extensive preparation. And, because you kind of get to that point where it's like, okay, yeah, I could go shoot, a soft-shell turtle, and with some cleaning and some different things, it could be tasty. But at the same time, I can go out here and shoot a mourning dove, and it's a whole lot easier to cook. You know what I'm saying? So, I guess where I'm going with this is, like, how extensive do these hunting schools get that you do? And, like, I guess how exotic do you go with the different things you teach people to cook and clean?
But we don't get that exotic unless we feel like they want to know that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we limit it to about 6 or 8 people per trip. And so I'm in there, I'm sitting in the blind with them, I'm talking to them all weekend. Then we're just getting a feel of what they want to know. And then when we start up the class, and we typically will butcher 3 animals and then cook those not all of them, but cook that for dinner that night in 15 different preparations. And I'll let them guide me. I'll say, well, what is it that your family is going to eat, or what are you most curious about, or what have you been told you can't eat off of a deer? Oh, you can't eat the ribs. Oh, yeah? Well, let's do this then. Let's try this out. Oh, you can't eat it raw. Oh, yeah? Well, we're gonna. I'm gonna do that just because you told me I couldn't. Things like that. Or I remember one time we were down in Matagorda, and we had some fishing guides sitting around, and we're serving just course after course of fish, and we served them some fried fish, which is, I think, one of the finest foods in the world, just fried fish. Mm-hmm. And one of them was like, this is the best fried fish I've ever had. And I was like, well, I'm glad you said that, because that's gaff top.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that. I would prefer to eat gaff top over trout.
Really?
I think that they're really. I mean, I know about the slime. No, but you don't have to point the slime out. I know about it. But flavor-wise, I think they're amazing. I think they have great texture and great flavor. And if you think about it this way, is like, you go out, you're standing in the bay, you're throwing a jig, and all of a sudden you hook this big fish and it fights like crazy. It's an 8-pound fish. Then you get it up and you see it's a gaff top and you're disappointed. Why? Why? What about that whole experience was disappointing? I'm looking at it thinking, no, this is amazing. Now I have an 8-pound gaff top that I get to eat, and I can still potentially catch 3 reds and some trout, and maybe a flounder or something like that. And I'm like, this is an amazing bonus. And, I understand that that's going to slime up your cooler and all that, but worth it to me. But to be so species specific about things, about where the enjoyment comes from or what you can eat, I think has gone overboard. It's like we've gone too far with it. And what is the point of us going out there into the woods or, the bay or on a creek? And if we're not, they're catching delicious food. And same with a gasper. We were running a trot line, and the last fish on the last hook was this nice 4 or 5 pound gasper. And this was back in December, and we were all real happy. And we fried that thing up for breakfast the next day, and it was good.
Ooh, fried fish for breakfast sounds like one of the best things. I've never done that, especially if it's fresh.
Oh yeah. No.
Yeah.
Fried bacon grease.
Oh man.
With bacon.
See,
yes,
Jesse,
you
talk my language, man.
Yeah.
So, let's go back to your restaurant stuff a little bit here. I understand you serve the wild boar, and because of the criminalization of market hunting, you can't really have any native North American game animals on the menu, right? So
right. All of the deer are axes, fallow, sika, elk that are either escapees or being culled off of game ranches.
Yeah, delicious animals nonetheless. Actually, axis is next to elk. Axis is probably my most favorite thing that I've eaten.
Absolutely,
by far. So, but it's still like not the true experience of going out and shooting one of a true wild animal yourself. It's still like you said, it's farm raised game animals or game meat. So, do you actively kind of promote the idea that like, hey, this is a reasonable facsimile, but it's not the real thing, and to do the real thing, you need to go out and do it yourself, or do you kind of keep those two worlds separate from your restaurant and then from the hunting schools?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of misperceptions about that. I mean, some people think that, in the morning I get a call from a sous chef. They're like, yeah, we need a hog and 3 catfish. And I'll put on my boots. It can't happen that way illegally. But, I think as far as the hogs go, I mean, that is exactly what you're getting out in the wild.
Sure.
And all of the fish we get, like we don't serve any farm-raised catfish. When we do serve catfish, we serve wild catfish.
That's cool.
Caught by some of the last trot liners, commercial trot liners out there in East Texas. And but with the deer, it is a little different. And we've had people challenge us to say like, oh, it's illegal to serve venison. I'm like, no, it's not this kind, but But I like that it started a conversation.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And we're not getting them off of kind of your classic venison farms either. They're coming off of these ranches, and they catch them with net guns, and they catch them in traps. And so they are, at least from a diet standpoint, pretty much living in the wild.
Yeah.
They're out there in the scrub, which is important to me also.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do have to have that conversation a lot. But in the end, if someone's choosing to cull something like that off their ranch, or it's an escapee that's competing with a native whitetail, again, we are serving a dual purpose with that.
Yeah, sure. So since you talked about, like it's important for you to I guess have free ranging meat and game on your plates there at the restaurant, do you feel that animals who maybe die a violent death, so like say you have a whitetail or a sika or what have you that is shot with an arrow or a bullet with an ethical shot. They don't really know what happened, and they expire and bleed out, as opposed to something that comes from a game farm, or say beef at a finishing cattle lot, grain finished or what have you. Do you feel that there's kind of a connection to taste and, I guess, plateability with animals like that? Not so much just the fact that, like, some people like the taste of grain-fed stuff better versus grass-fed or what have you, but like the actual way the animal lives and dies. Do you feel like that kind of reflects into how it can be prepared?
Absolutely, and I think that there's no denying that. I'll give you one anecdotal example of that, in that we had a film crew come in, and I was taking this guy on his first hunt ever, and he needed to kill a pig, and we really needed to get a pig on the ground any way we could. So I put some snares out on crossings under the fence where I knew pigs to be crossing, just to kind of double up. Mm-hmm. And then I went and sat with him in a blind, and he shot a probably about 80-pound sow out of the blind, rolled it, died immediately. And then we went and checked the snares, and there was about an 80-pound sow, in one of the snares. We took him back. We killed her immediately upon getting there. Took them back, butchered them both. The one that he had shot was great, tasted really nice. The one that we caught in the snare was inedible.
Man.
Yeah.
And, if you can talk to, veterinarians or, anybody that understands physiology, and it is that stress, that lactic acid, all those things that build up, and they will exacerbate that gamey flavor that you find in game meats and make them pretty bad. And a lot of times too, in a class, when we're talking about eating big boars, which is, I have this conversation so much, and I say, eat them all, try them. In fact, some of the best feral hog I've ever had came off of 150-pound plus boars. They can be very good. I had a guy in a class one time, and he said, yeah, we shot I can't remember, a big 250, whatever, pound boar. And he said, yeah, it was actually really good. And I said, well, when you shot it, what happened? He said, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, did it run or did it drop? And he said, oh, we shot it in the air and it just dropped. And I'm like, well, there's, I think that there could be something to that. Mm-hmm. If they run for 30 seconds, and that's 30 seconds of stress, things like that do come into play. And I also think, one time I was sitting on a panel, it was at South by Southwest, and I was kind of confronted about somebody about hunting. And like you were just saying, there's different ways animals can die. There's kind of like three ways. One is they can go to a slaughterhouse if they're a domesticated animal, mm-hmm. and they wait in line. There's the smell of death. They know what's happening, and whether it's a cow who might have a restricted understanding of what's going on, or a smarter animal like a pig.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or they can die in the wild, and no animal ever goes and lays down in a meadow full of little daffodils and falls asleep and walks into the light. Mm-hmm. That it never happens that way. The fire ants, the coyotes are gonna get them first.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or something. And I don't in the wild, I don't think it ever is a peaceful way to die. Mm-hmm. Or there's the third option. And that's, an animal sticks its head out, it walks into that meadow, boom, and it dies. Mm-hmm. And, for people that are opposed to hunting, especially, I say, well, if you're personifying animals, or you're trying to, make a case for the best death, which of those three do you choose? And I think it would be the quick death in your natural environment,
right?
With as little stress as possible. Mm-hmm. Now, you're also sometimes there's a bad shot and the animal may run and you have to track it, but I think that's you have to incorporate that into hunting as things go wrong in the wild, and that could be a factor. But I think at the end of the day, hunting an animal is the best way for everyone, for you to eat it and for the animal to die as well.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to kind of head a little bit different direction here, maybe. But how much foraging have you done?
A little bit.
Yeah.
We forage, things like wild chilies. I found some dried up chiltepine peppers yesterday. Mushrooms here and there, especially, our mushroom seasons are really hit or miss here. But I mean, some years it's amazing. We'll find morels and chanterelles. Things like cactus fruit, agarita. And then, I have a 7-year-old daughter. So, I mean, things like dewberries.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Are just a given, and that's just good fun. And, that's like, you can kind of incorporate a little bit of crappie fishing and dewberry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, if it's there, for sure. And I love the idea of eating, wild plants. Or, I was talking yesterday also about the white bass run, and that there's always wild onions coming up where you're catching white bass. And the same, I don't know if it's photo period or lunar phase or temperatures or whatever it is, but if there are wild onions growing, then there's probably white bass spawning. And
so the wild onions, I'm just kind of curious. That's you tend to smell them. I feel like if you smell something that smells like an onion, can you go wrong eating it? As far as you've seen,
you can't go wrong. That's what I've heard, is that if it has that oniony smell, then it is definitely edible. It's not going to be I can't remember what it is an edible allium. Yeah.
So you mentioned the white bass earlier, and this kind of piqued my interest. What's your favorite way of doing those? Because those are pretty readily available across the state, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys are close to the Sabine out there, too.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Where, I mean, wow, you catch a 50-pound limit of white bass. There's, I love white bass. I am not often someone to cut the bloodline out of a fish, but I do like to do that on white bass. And, I in all honesty, I'm going to fry them.
Yeah.
And maybe chop up some, maybe cook those onions and chop those up and fold them into mayonnaise with some, maybe a little bit of fresh herb or something, and serve it with that. Something real simple. White bass is great. I mean, I love catching them. It's one of my favorites. I was looking at my pictures from last year, and I caught the first males on February 8th of last year, which is...
That's early.
And we were getting into limits on February 22nd last year.
Man.
So it's time.
Yep.
I got to reset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Dust that stuff off and get ready to
That's right.
hike.
Yeah, and that's a good fly rod quarry for us. Tyler and I have just caught the fly rod bug in the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
That's just what we love to do. And, those shallow water creeks, and, it's pretty easy when you can throw a size 12 clouser or something and just rip white bass all day. And, or we call them sand bass, but, same thing.
Yeah.
But, and then really, I didn't grow up targeting them much in the spring up here as much as we did in the summer when they get in the big schools out in the lakes, and chasing them, and you're fishing them like they're bonita or tuna or something, offshore. That's a lot of fun, too. It's enjoyable. And that kind of, I guess, leads me into another question for, I guess, culinary options. Let's just call it that way. So we, as humans, oftentimes think of herbivores as food, right? Like, everybody knows that you see a cow and it's food. It's eating grass. It's food. And then hogs would be omnivore. Some people eat things like coons, which I like coon, but it's not a common thing. But a true carnivore, when you're talking land animals, is not very widely accepted as like food. Like, and I have a mental block against it. Like, I just do not want to eat a coyote. It's not in my list. But when you switch over to fish, the carnivorous fish are really what you end up eating. People don't really want to eat things like carp, who are omnivores, or grass carp or things like that. So, I guess why is that? And then have you dabbled into the whole, I guess, mammal or land animal carnivore side of things?
I don't know why that is. I've definitely thought about that because as you stated, it's just the reverse.
Yeah.
I've tried carp before. It's fine. Definitely not on the top of the list. It doesn't taste as good as the carnivorous fish.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as, eating, predators and, top apex animals like that, I've not, I don't have a clear answer for you on that either. I've not eaten them. I also don't shoot them. So that's one thing. And I recently heard that, somebody was handing out bobcat jerky and that it was everybody's favorite. And
Mm-hmm.
well, that's great. I mean, you killed a bobcat and you made jerky. Good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the way that I hunt and fish is just like I like to shoot what I like to eat, and so most of the time it's hogs and ducks and crappie and white bass and catfish. That right there makes up 90% of and deer. That's 90% of what I eat. So I mean, I don't really feel the need to get exotic or even in dabble in that stuff. But and I mean, it's kind of. I mean, I never want to be judgy. I mean, about what you're shooting. If you need to control coyotes on your property, then you should do so.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't ever have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I see coyote, and I wish it well.
Yeah. I like it. I like that take, man, because I feel like a lot of times people try to get weird for the sake of being weird. And I'm sure you get that because you live in Austin, right? That's like your slogan. Keep it weird. But I like to try new things with the allure that like the new things will taste good. But like if I try something and I don't like it or it's not that great, I'm not going to continue to do it. And then there's some things I just don't desire to eat. Like I don't want to like eat something weird like, these coyote eyeballs are delicious, like, yeah, right. Like, okay, so, but what's the point? You kind of get to that point where I don't ever want to treat my food as a novelty. You know what I'm saying? Like
I agree with you.
I want to like respect the game that I take, and I want to eat the parts that are edible, and eat the game that is considered edible or that I care to eat. And I'm not going to shoot something without a purpose, like you were saying earlier. But at the same time, like I don't want to like go out and try to find like the weirdest thing I can shoot just so I can eat it. And I like you said, not to get too judgy. I'm sure there's people that do enjoy coyote eyeballs, but it's just not going to be me. You know what I mean? But I don't know. It's just it's weird to see those trends, and I think that it's so much more relatable to the common person. Kind of like what you were saying way back at the beginning. Like instead of showing you how to like take this this deer bladder and turn it into some sort of a Italian delicacy, let's just show you how to take these ribs and make them something you eat on Tuesday, right? Like you lose people when you start getting too weird or too out there. I guess you'll gain a few that really like the weird stuff, but for the common purpose,
plenty of that. There's plenty of that out there.
Yeah,
I'll also say that it's very, very grounding to have a kid eating.
Yes.
My daughter's not exactly picky, but when it comes to the day-to-day stuff I'm going to make, it is a little bit limiting, and it also affects the way that I cut a deer or a hog. Now most of it will go into ground or breakfast sausage or make hot dogs out of venison, things like that.
Yeah.
And that is also, and that's real world application. That's when you take everything else out of it, all the romance and like, oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to be so impressive. But that's when you're looking at that deer or that hog and you're like, I need to make food for the family. What are they going to eat?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's how I treat it a lot of times too. Kind of on this subject, your book is of the same concepts, and the overall concept is pretty interesting to me. You took a photographer on several hunts, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you kind of run through how you got the idea and what the book is? And I mean, do a plug for yourself too. Feel free to do that.
Well, yeah. I mean, the book, it came out almost 6 years ago now. And so, definitely learned a lot since. But the basic idea behind it was, as I said earlier, I came to hunting later on in life, and it was all these things that I had learned in applications, and coming at it as a novice, how to clean an animal, how to butcher that animal, and how to cook it most effectively. And I didn't really see a lot on the marketplace like that. Since that time, there's been kind of a proliferation of really good quality cookbooks. I mean, Hank Shaw writes amazing books. Stephen Ranella has come out with a series of very just comprehensive books on game and cleaning and cooking and these things. So at the time, I wanted something that was very visually helpful, where it would show you step by step, this is how you skin a squirrel, or how you half shell a black drum, or how you break down a hog, and how to cut the ribs or the chops, and this and that, and then some nice simple recipes. I was lucky enough to work with a very talented photographer who's really patient and good at being quiet. And we're working on another book now.
Awesome.
And this one it's no surprise, but this next one is going to be dedicated only to feral hogs.
That's cool. I was going to ask you about that actually, because I had read, I think on your website or something, that you guys were trying to decide on a concept.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the thing that people ask about. It's the proverbial elephant in the room, and so that's I love the educational aspect. So we decided to tackle that because I think that it would just be useful. It's a field guide, this is what to do with them. But the book, I mean, originally we set out to just do this really simple, not high level expertise cookbook and guide, and just nice little stories in there. I think people enjoy reading I know I enjoy reading quick, short stories about hunting and fishing. I don't know what our time limit is today, but I could sit here and talk to you guys for hours for sure. I love the story aspect of it, and talking about, there's this time 5 years ago, it was raining and the rain stopped, and the fish, whatever, it's just, so kind of a book like that, that was real, and it was moderately successful. And I'm really glad that we put that work into it, and it was really fun, and we still get people that appreciate that book, and that means a lot to me. They come and they're like, yeah, I got blood all over my book, and I'm like,
that's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And we definitely need to do a part 2 one of these days, and where we can sit down and maybe tell some stories there at the restaurant or something. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Sorry we don't make it down to Austin that often, but when we do, we're coming to see you. No, don't worry about that.
I think more importantly, I need to come see you.
Hey, man,
you're in the heart of it out there.
Oh yeah,
I love that part of the world.
Hey, dude, have you ever trot lined and pulled up a big flathead or Appaloosa catfish?
We run. First off, I don't have a boat, so we wade. We'll put on waders and run trot lines, and we'll catch some blue cats here and there, but not. I've caught a couple yellow cats, but nothing huge.
Yeah, well, you've probably heard about them some, and they have a lot more, I guess, oil or fat to them. And but if done right, we did. I grew up doing Cajun smoked Appaloosa fillets, and man, it was just it's one of my greatest meals. It's just something I love. So anyways, if you're free around May, come up here and join us, and we'll do a little bit of that and a bunch of other things.
So good.
That'd be awesome. But anyways, I feel like that you've got a great thing going here, man, with the educating people on what really is food, and what where food comes from, and how you can go out and get to it yourself and turn these wild, organic, free, happy animals into food that you can feed your family and be healthy with. But with that being said, it's not a lot of good to have those animals on the landscape if there's no access. And this is going to be kind of like a little, I guess, public lands plug here. I can imagine that through these hunting schools that you do that question comes up from time to time on, these people who are trying to get introduced to hunting, but then they see the price of a deer lease is $1,500 a year. And when you start doing a little math and chicken's $2 a pound at the grocery store, like, it gets pretty tough to want to go and lease a place. So I guess my first question is, do you talk much about the public land stuff with people who are taking these classes and people that you encounter? And then I guess how do you feel about hunters' access and where we're at with that nowadays, and where do we need to be headed, especially on a state level?
Yeah, that is an exceptional question, and we do address that constantly. So you have a new hunter come to a class, and they went to the academy and they bought the rifle, they bought the game winner camo jacket. They're ready to go.
Oh yeah.
Well, I own several, to be clear. So, and then they come out to the ranch where they pay a pretty high amount to come with us for this weekend and kind of get the crash course on everything. And then at the end of it, they're like, "So what's next?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's a really good question. We live in a state that's 97, 98% privately owned. And so you do have a little bit of an uphill battle. But the first thing I do is refer them to the annual public hunting permit with Parks and Wildlife, which I think, just like anything else, you'll get out of that what you put in. If you're willing to hike more and just be more tenacious than other hunters, then you can potentially get more out of public lands. I also, what has worked for me personally is making friends with farmers. Now, I make friends with farmers a lot because I spend a lot of money with them.
Yeah.
But the second method, I was like, you know what you need to start doing? First off, you need to go to the farmer's market because that's where the best produce is at. And also that's the people you need to support. Most of the people that you're buying produce from at the farmer's market have a hog problem. Most of them do. I'm not saying, on the first date when you go up there and buy that first head of cauliflower and a cabbage, that you need to ask if you can come out on their land. But I'm saying maybe after 6 months in conversation, when you hear them saying, yeah, the hogs got into that south pasture and just tore up all my onions yesterday, that's when you can step in and be like, well, what about me coming out and sitting there, one night this week and trying to, keep them out of there? And a lot of times the answer is going to be like, sure. I think there's other ways to go about it, but public hunting is probably the most reliable. And I also would like to, plug Parks and Wildlife and Texas Wildlife Association, and, in their efforts for education and keeping these accessible, keeping these resources as accessible as they possibly can be. I get to participate in a mentored hunt at Inks Lake every year, and it's cool. A lot of fun. We'll guide first-time hunters on we'll go shoot deer and then show them how to clean and butcher and make sausage, and we cook a couple meals for them, and it's really rewarding. But when it comes down to it, that's 8 or 10 people a year that we're getting in there and getting them that opportunity when there's a lot more. And I think it's a fine balance too, because your private landowners in Texas are acting as stewards of said land and keeping it generally in this nice wild condition. And so same with the hog problem. I don't know what the overall overarching answer is going to be to keep the general public having access to hunting without degrading the land and the hunting. But I would like to, continue to work towards it where people can get those opportunities. And I think the start is with public lands, going through Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah, for sure. We had KC and I spent a lot of time on public lands, and we had opportunities to shoot deer this year, and we like to shoot. We like to not scare too many deer out of an area that we may have a pretty decent buck in sometimes. So we'll pass some does, early in the season and such. But even still, the deer hunting can be hard on some of these public properties. But the one thing that we're going to continue circling back to, obviously, is that we had like hogs until like December. We had hogs every time we went out to public land. We were within bow range of hogs pretty much.
Yeah.
And so, that opportunity, you may not be able to shoot a deer out there on public land, but there are plenty of places with hogs out there that you can go on public land and shoot, many as you want, just about. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think, and most new hunters either don't care or shouldn't care that much whether they're shooting a deer or a hog.
Yeah.
Just get out there and get that experience.
Exactly.
And keep that available to them. And I think it's really important to keep Parks and Wildlife in a position where they can maintain public access to land.
Yeah, for sure. They're doing good things. Jesse, I appreciate this a lot, man. This has been one of my most anticipated podcast interviews that I have had, and I've been wanting to do this for several months now, even though you and I only have a few weeks of correspondence. But man, I appreciate your time, and I guess would open it up to kind of allow you to plug what you got going on. Where can people buy the book, and how can they find the restaurant, and maybe take a course in hunting or butchering?
Oh, well, sure. Well, first off, thank you for the opportunity of being on the podcast. It's, a real pleasure talking to you guys, and I'm gonna hold you to that invitation.
Hey, we're for real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The book, probably the most easy way to get it is off of Amazon. It's called Afield, one word, A Chef's Guide to Cooking and Preparing Wild Game and Fish. Available through there. You can also buy it at the restaurant. We're on Manor Road here in Austin, and then the Taqueria, which we just opened about 3 weeks ago. That's the one that is only serving feral hog and venison. No beef, no domestic pork.
Cool.
We're downtown in the heart of downtown Austin, serving tacos to suits all day. And you can get the book there too. And then the classes we offer are under a third branch of the business. It's called the New School of Traditional Cookery, and it is found on our website, the Dai Due website, spelled DAIDUE. And it has a lot of information on there about different types of classes. We do open enrollment public classes that anybody can come to, and we'll put together a group. We do a lot of private classes where a group will have us out to their ranch or down to the coast, where we'll put together a team of guides. We'll go flounder gigging, we'll go bay fishing, or we can bring a group out to a ranch that we partner with. And that's the ones where we are demonstrating, how to, skin, gut, clean, butcher, cook animals. And we call it like an immersive cooking process. And then if we're hunting pigs, we're going to only eat feral hog for 3 days. That's all, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's what we're going to have. We're going to present everything that we're doing in context, in real time. And then if we're down at the coast, you're going to eat fish for breakfast, lunch, and dinner also. So we'll run crab traps, and we'll gig flounder, and we are, just try to educate on as many things as you want to learn about. It's, we've had groups say, oh, hey, we really want to focus on sausage. Sure thing. We'll spend 5 hours on sausage. Things like that. So that's the New School of Traditional Cookery. The website's got lots of press on there. We've taken a lot of friends from up north, from New York and so forth on hunts. And, they've written about it. We've been in Texas Monthly, Wall Street Journal. We did a video for Yeti, and a lot of other things. But, when it comes down to it, it's, I love my job. I get to go to the King Ranch in about 2 weeks and take a group of guys. They're down there shooting nilgai.
Cool.
And I'm going to teach them how to butcher nilgai, and basically just hang out on the King Ranch for 3 days.
That's not a bad life.
And cutting nilgai for these guys. So.
That's pretty posh.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a good job. So
cool. Well,
that's what we do.
Yeah, we'll make sure and link to all that in the podcast notes. So if you're listening, make sure and look underneath the podcast in these notes, and you can find any of that. And again, Jesse, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Cool.
No
Yeah,
problem, dude. Thanks.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Well, after that, I am ready to go to Gorditas.
Starving
Where are you going?
to my vehicle. I've got Elkhart in the vehicle.
Do you?
Yes.
Ooh.
I got an Elkhart salad.
Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
eating healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, and you walked a bunch on public land this week. So
I know it,
this
dude.
weekend.
Yeah.
You're going to be in good shape.
I doubt it.
You look tired, man.
I am a little bit. I actually had a really good night's sleep last night, but the night before, did not get a lot of sleep. Sometimes, whenever your family world and then your hunting world meet, and the family world's the night before the hunting world starts the next morning, 4 hours of sleep. It's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
But, well, it's part of it. It's fun, what makes it fun.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things you got to get enough sleep to feel good and function well, but like at the same time, you don't want to sleep your life away.
That's right, man. So. You can sleep when you're dead.
Yep.
But
I guess.
But man, I'm pretty pumped about. I guess kind of one of the cool things about the off season is we really get to expand our cooking and do some fun stuff, and it's been pretty inspirational. Talking to Jesse and I like his kind of down home feel.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I do too, man. I really appreciate that because it really does resonate with me. I like to cook wild game a lot, and you do too. But I still am not gonna, like we were saying, like wrap up something in a bladder and cook it, with some kind of, what do you say, lingberry sauce or something, like these are things that I'm not going to do, all the time I have several recipe books for wild game, and there's like some ingredient in there. It's like, you can get this at the Asian market. And I'm like, the closest Asian market to me is like an hour and a half away. So I'm probably not going up to the Asian market to get this.
I want to be able to get at the Walmart.
Yes, it has to be at the Walmarts.
Yeah.
So anyway, I can appreciate that for sure. And I'm about to appreciate some down-home Mexican food cooking right now. So that's all I got to say, I think. You got anything else?
That's all I got, man.
All right. So make sure, if you enjoy what you're hearing, give us a review either on Facebook or iTunes. And we will see you soon. God bless you guys. Love you. And remember, this is your element.
Live in it.